So last time, I think we just had a review of what we have done. Okay, so from today's class, we should be starting with fi'l. But as you know, that we have not read some of these texts because they were related to fi'l. And what I wanted to do is have a complete separate topic on fi'l, so we can spend a little bit more time as an independent topic. Initially, I think I wanted to spend a lot more time on fi'l, especially because some of the concept in fi'l, you won't find them in Nahu. Okay, so as you understand, with regards to the Nahu, the fi'l is not talked about too much. Okay, usually in the Sarf class, this is where you'll be spending a lot more time in fi'l. So that's why I wanted to initially spend a lot more time in the verb and bring some of the topics from the Sarf. But I think for now, we have to kind of make this assumption that everyone has some verb knowledge. Either you studied with me Al-Kitab Al-Asasi. If you have done that, Alhamdulillah, I think we covered a lot on verbs, a lot meaning enough with conjugations and everything so that you can follow through. My main concern is isnad, the conjugations. Okay, this conjugation is one of the best place to learn the conjugations is probably Modena book 2. Seriously, Modena book 2, it goes very details in all the conjugations. You understand what I mean by conjugations, right? Like how do you attach pronouns to the verbs? ذهبت, ذهبتي, this type of things. And the present tense, أذهب, تذهب, نذهب, يذهبون, these conjugations. So this is something that initially I wanted to do, but instead what I'm thinking that maybe we should continue with the Ajrumiyyah as it is, and then once we are done, we can probably do one soft book. Okay, so maybe that's why I don't want to bring too much of those topic here. Um, there are a few things you still have to know because when the Sheikh starts talking about the verbs, he will only give you one type of division in the verb, which is, we know this one, Madi, Mudari, and Amr. But there are so many other divisions that the Sarf class will talk about. So I will just start with, few things that you need to know before we start reading them, okay? So af'al, the verb, it has two types. One is sahih and one is mu'tal. Sahih and mu'tal. Okay, this concept would be a little bit important, especially when we talk about the alama of the fi'l, okay? So sahih, what is sahih? I'm not going to go too much in details because Sahih has many different types and Mu'tal has many different types. Right now, I just want to give you a little bit of what we mean. By and large, Sahih means that the letter is not among the huruf al-illa. Okay, here's another concept you have to know. Who knows what are the huruf al-illa? Hmm? Ahsantum. Yes, so these are alif, waw, and ya. Alif, waw, and ya. These are the three letters. Guys, they are your enemies. In Arabic language, they will give you a lot of hard time. These three letters pretty much screws up a lot of conjugations. It gives extremely a problem. So whenever you have these three letters coming, whether in the beginning or in the middle or the end, the pain awaits. So there, another way in English we can call it weak letters because these letters are weak, so they always have some kind of change happens. Either they will be dropped or it will be changed into something or something will happen. Okay, something will happen. So just remember this concept, huruf al-illa. So sahih means that you don't have, sorry, I didn't mean to say at the end. Sahih means that you will not have any of these huruf al-illa in the verb. When it's in the verb, we mean the root letters. Here's another concept you have to know, the root letters. Root letters. The root letters are usually like 95% of the time would be three letters only. Every noun and verbs, they have a root letters. And then we add additional letters to these root letters to make more words. These are again topics of sarf. Most of this talk will be related to the sarf. Okay, so for example, we say kataba. So we say kataba, kataba. What are the root letters here? We can see there's only three letters. So the letters are what? Kaf, ta, and ba. These are the root letters. So from these root letters, we can see we can make it katib, katibun, maktub, maktub, and so many things happening, right? So when you see something as maktub, there's definitely more than three letters, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, but what are the root letters? Root letters still going back to the kaf and the ta and the ba. So we'll learn much more in details. How do we form these things, and how do we, find out the root letters? There are many different techniques, but honestly, I initially wanted to get into this, but I don't think it's the Ajrumiyyah is the right class for that. Inshallah, we will have a separate solve. The point what I'm trying to explain is that you have to understand the concept of root. So if you see 4, 5 letters, chances are its root letters are only 3, and rarely you will find 4. In verbs, you only have 3 or 4 root letters. In noun, you can have 5 root letters, but very rare. Majority of the time, most of the words it will go back to 3 root letters. Okay, so when we say the verb is sahih, we mean that its root letters are not any of those huruf al-illa. Okay, so for example, if you look at dhahaba, is there any of huruf al-illa here? No. So that means it will be considered as sahih. فهمتم? Kataba. So this would be all sahih. But what if you have akhada? Akhada. We have a hamza here. Is it sahih? I have a no and yes. All you have to do, guys, is go back to these 3 letters. If it's not alif, it's not waw, it's not ya, it will be still considered sahih. So is hamza alif? No, hamza is not alif. It's hamza, it's not alif. So that means it is still, yes, mahmuz. Those names I'm not going to go into. Every one of them has a name. This one is called Salim. This one is Mahmuz. Then you have Muda'af. You have all these names. But here, honestly, I don't want to get into the names and everything. Okay, so it will be very shallow way of explaining what's going on. So this will still be considered as Sahih. And then what about this one? Adda. First of all, how many letters are there, by the way? Remember, I told you every verb needs to have 3 letters. It looks like we have a 2. Exactly. Shadda means it says you have adda. This one is exactly the same thing. The Arab likes everything concise. Okay, so they will make it into concise. So we have shadda basically means you have a double of that letter. First one is being sukun, and the second one is taking the haraka that you put on the shadda. Now, so now that we expanded it, is there a sahih? Is there any harful illa? No, there's no harful illa. So this is still considered sahih, but it has a name, is muda'af. Yeah, so you wanted to know the difference between a mahmuz and sahih. So sahih is the umbrella branch. This is the bigger category. Under the sahih, you have 3 types. One is salim, and salim means it will not have hamza or it will not have shadda. So this is like pure, the best word you can possibly have, especially when it comes to conjugations. If all the words was salim, all the verbs were salim, your verb conjugation would have been like a math. Like if you know a few rules, your life is easy. Okay, because they genuinely follow simple patterns, how you conjugate everything. But they're not, the world is not perfect. The second type of sahih we have mahmuz. Mahmuz. Okay, so mahmuz is when you have hamza. So if the verb has hamza, still it is not your alif, waw, and ya. So that means it still goes under the sahih, but because it has hamza, there are some complications. The few complication happens when you do conjugations. That's why they make into a separate category. And then you have a muda'af. Muda'af. or you can also use it alif. Okay, so mudaf basically when it has shadda, when something's double. The example we had, that's why I give you these three examples. The first one is being salim, a second one is being mahmuz, and third one is being mudaf. So here, even though we have shadda, but we know that there's no huruful illa. And is it clear now, sister? Sahih would be the bigger branch. Only thing we're concerned about Sahih is that there is no harf al-illa. So what happens when you go to Mu'tal? Of course, Mu'tal means you have one of these letters somewhere, either in the beginning or in the middle or at the end. Guys, if I start talking about Mu'tal, we will be stuck here for the rest of the day or maybe a few more days because Mu'tal is a problem. Mu'tal is very problem. So for example, we have wajada, wajada, right? So we have wow in the beginning. Again, they all have name. This one also have names called mithal. I don't want to bore with the names in right now. If you have a harf al in the beginning, then it will be considered as mithal. Then you have qala. Now you have harf al in the middle. Ajwaf. This is called ajwaf. And then you have, for example, sa'a. And you have a harf al at the end. This will be naqis. And believe it or not, we have harf al where you have two. Anybody want to give me an example? Oh, waka, waka. Here and you have here. And believe it or not, when you make this word into a common verb, because of these things, the common verb is just one letter, T. So they give you a lot of hard time. Okay, this huruf lila gives you lots of hard time. So anyway, so this division you have to know. You have a verb that can be divided into sahih and mu'tal. Sahih is when you don't have any huruf al-illa, and mu'tal when you have huruf al-illa. Yes, because we're dealing with what? We're dealing with nahu. Remember we talked about nahu. Nahu's main concern is awakhir al-kalima, i'rab. Nahu does not concern about the changes, the conjugations. These are the topics of sarf. Okay, but here we will have to deal with something, especially of mu'tal and naqis, because as you will see, there will be an impact how we identify something is majzum or mansub or not. Okay, so these things will be important. Fahimtum? So this is the first taqsim that we wanted to know about the fi'l. There are other so many different taqsim. We have different divisions how we can say, for example, fi'l, lazim and muta'addi, whether something is transitive or intransitive. I think I will not have this discussion right now here. If the time comes, we will go into it. The one division that the Nahu will talk about, which is the division that the author mentioned here. Okay, and this is the division I think all of you will know. So remember, I haven't forgotten that we haven't read a lot of things from here. We have to go back there. But before I do, I have to introduce the verbs. Anwa ul fi'l. And this is the things that you already know. We have al-madi and we have al-mudari' and we have al-amr. So this one is the Nahu is interested in. Why? Because remember, Nahu is concerned about whether anything has changes or not. So they looked at noun. They say, of course, noun has changes. So, Muhammadun, Muhammadan, Muhammadin, all these things happening. They're very interested in this kind of stuff. This is their bread and butter. So they go and hunt what happens, why does change happens, what happens, all of these things. So they will go into details. And trust me, this discussion is coming. Then they go into a huruf. Is there any changes? They are very disappointed because nothing changes. So it's like, that's not interesting. Then they come to the fi'l, verb. They see what's going on. They see, okay, so now we have three types of verbs. We have al-madi, we have mudari, and al-amr. So they see the madi, it doesn't change. Then amr doesn't change. And something happens with mudari and looks like mudari. Yes, it does change. Okay, so what happens is that they're obviously not so much interested in the madi and amr. They are very much interested in mudari. So they see that mudari has states just like nouns. Nouns had, remember if you recall, it has state of raf, you have nasb, and it has jar. So noun can be marfu, mansub, and majrur. But they see in the mudari, they have same thing, they have the rough state. Okay, they have the nas state, and they don't have your jar state. Instead of the jar state, they have jazm state. Okay, jazm. So now, obviously, their main interest in to see how do we identify rough? What are the alama of the rough? How do we know the verb is in the rough state? How do we know the verb is in nasb state? How do we know the verb is in the jazm state? And this question will be answered what we skipped before. Okay, so we'll read them. Once they deal with that, then they will figure out, okay, so now that it has three different states, when something becomes rough, when something becomes nasb, and when something becomes jazm, why does this change happen? And this is something that we'll study in the coming lesson. You understand what they're trying to do. This is the same thing with all of them. Same thing with the noun, same thing with the verb, the mudari. So the musannif here, he just mentioned, let us read what he said here, because we are already talking about this thing. He says, Babul af'al, the chapter on the verbs, and he goes on to say, al-af'alu thalatha. So their verbs are three types. So the first one is madin, the second one is mudari, and the third one is al-amr. This is very old news. You guys know them already. Then he gives example, nahwa, say, ضرب يضرب wadrib. So ضرب يضرب idrib. So these are your three forms of verbs. This is past tense, madi. This is present tense, al-mudari, and this is amr. You guys know them already. If you don't, I don't know. You're probably gonna have a hard time dealing with this chapter at least. Then he quickly mentions few things about them. So we know that madi and amr would be mabni. So what he says, فالماضي مفتوح الآخر أبدا. So he wants to say that the past tense verbs, so you have ذهب, and he, remember in the grammar, we're only interested at the end. So what he's saying, maftuhul akhir. So maftuh here doesn't mean open, it means the fatha. So it has a fatha at the end, abada, always, da'iman. So basically he wants to say that madi is mabni, and it's mabni ala fatha. It is mabni on the fatha. And he used the word abada, so meaning always. Now there is a lot of tafsil. Here, I don't know how much I want to discuss why he said this, what does it mean. Let me just read the Amr also, then I'll maybe talk about how to understand this. The second one, he says, wal amr, and the command verb, majzumun abada. And it is in the state of jazm abada. And he didn't mention anything about sukun, because jazm is always sukun. So that means he wants to say the command verbs are mabni ala sukun da'iman. That's what he wants to say. Okay, so but is it true? How do we understand? There's a lot of discussion, because there's two schools of thought. Honestly, there's two schools of thought. One, what the author mentioned, that the past tense is always mabni on fatha, always. But then you might be thinking, wait a minute, what about here? Dhahabu, your ba, this one is not in fatha. From dhahaba, from fatha, it became a dhamma. Hmm? Yes. So we cannot say that it's a mabni on fatha all the time, right? So the school that he's following, what the way he will answer is by taqdiri. He will say this is a taqdir happening here. Why is a taqdir happening? Because taqdir can happen in many different. We have already covered taqdir. So for example, if we say sa'a, so answer my question. It is mabni on what? You should be comfortable with this idea, because we've talked about this idea with the nouns. There's no difference. Remember, we've done taqdiri. Okay, we have a sukun. Both of the answer is wrong. How do we do taqdiri? We talked about ismul manqus. We have talked about ismul maqsur. When you have alif or ya and waw, there's taqdiri happens. Here, we don't have to say sukun. We can go with the default. We can say what Sheikh is saying, that it is mabni on fatha. Because it's alif, we can say there's a fatha here. But we cannot see the fatha, because why? Because of ta'adhur. Remember the three problem we talked about? Ta'adhur happens when there's alif. Here we cannot say that it's mabni on sukun. It has to be a fatha taqdiri. Okay, you understand? This is because alif cannot take anything other than the sukun. So this is one type of taqdeer is happening here. Because of ta'addur, we have to say there is a hidden alif, meaning there is alif, you cannot say. Same thing if we have yad'u, yad'u, right? So here, for example, we're supposed to have a dhamma here, but the dhamma will be taqdiri because of waw. Same concept with the noun. So what this school of thought they're trying to say is that everything is taqdiri other than the fatha. So they will get into, you can read Tuhfat al-Saniya, he goes into much more in details explanation why they say it's taqdiri, because they said they don't like too many harakas continuously. So they will say that's why you have to estimate this one as a fatha. Okay, so they go into that school of thought. They just want to say it is always fatha, but any changes that happens, it's because of taqdiri. But honestly, I don't like that. I'm just only reason I'm mentioning because of Ajrumiyyah saying. Otherwise, the other scholars they will say no, it is mabni on fatha, which is the default, what we have dhahaba, and it can also be mabni on dhamma. It can also be mabni on sukun. Okay, so they will make things a little bit easier. So it can be fatha. It can be fatha, mabni on fatha. It can be mabni on dhamma, or it can be mabni on sukun. One is the mabni on dhamma, is when you have waw al-jama'a. When you have mabni on sukun, ta al-fa'il, for example, dhahabtu, dhahabtu. You see, this is sukun is coming. I think you should focus on this explanation, because Alfi ibn Malik and all of these other places, this explanation is what they use, not what Musannif is using here. So your past tense verb can be mabni on fatha, or it can be mabni on dhamma, or it can be mabni on sukun. So for dhahabu, they will say, no, this is not mabni on fatha, this will be mabni on dhamma. فهمتم? Now, okay, so let me just quickly read what he's saying. So this is the mumta, because the reason I'm reading this one is very simple. But if you go to the Tuhfat al-Saniya, maybe I'll just show you the few lines where you will see this discussion why the author is saying it's mabni on fatha for all of these cases. He will explain very nicely. Okay, so let me just read this part, so at least we are covered what we read so far. This Babul Afal, we read this part, we don't have to read. So Sharh, he goes ينقسم الفعل إلى ماضي مضارع والأمر. فالماضي نحو ضرب، المضارع يضرب، الأمر اضرب. وكل فعل من هذه الأفعال أحكام خاصة به. So for all of them, there are some specific rules for each of them, right? So the first one he goes, أولا فعل ماضي. The first one is the past tense. حكمه يبنى دائما. It is always what? Is always mabni. See here, he did not say دائما على فتحة. He did not say that. So instead, what he's saying, lahu thalathu halat. It has three situations. It says yubna ala fatha. It will be either mabni on fatha, إذا lam yattasil bihi shay'un, if nothing is connected to it. So for dhahaba, as you saw, there's nothing connected to it, so it is mabni on fatha. Nahu qawlihi ta'ala qala rabbuka, qala rabbuka. So it is mabni on fatha. أو اتصالات به تاء التأنيث الساكنة, or the تاء التأنيث ساكنة, the feminine ta is connected. نحو قوله تعالى قالت نملة. So you see this, when you have the قالت تاء الساكنة, what happens? Still is مبني على فتحة. Still مبني على فتحة. We still have the فتحة. أو ألف الاثنين, or the dual اثنين. نحو قوله تعالى وقال. So you see, so you have the lam and you have the alif. This alif is for the dual, but this qala, the lam, that is part of uh, the verb qala, that is, you can see it is fatha. So this is how you will go into all of them. So then it will say yubna ala dhamma إذا اتصلت به واو الجماعة. This is the only time it will be mabni ala dhamma, when you have the waw of jama'a, which is qalu. وقالوا سمعنا. Here we have the lam doesn't have fatha anymore. It has a dhamma. And why? Because of its connecting with waw al jama'a. And then he goes into for the sukun. What happens? Because ta'ul fa'il qultu. And when you say ta'ul fa'il, it is for all the ta with haraka. Qultu, qulti, qulta. فهمتم? So this is the way they explained. But look what he said here. He says فوائد, some beneficial. من العلماء من ذهب إلى أن الماضي مبني على فتح. From the scholars, scholars he means in grammarians, who considered من ذهب إلى أن الماضي, who considered that the past tense مبني على فتحة, مبني على فتحة في سائر الأحوال, for rest, meaning all the cases. Okay, so he's trying to say there are some scholars who considers that the past tense is mabni on fatha for all the situations. ولكن الفتحة إما ظاهرة أو ضرب. So they want to say the fatha will either be apparent that you can see like ضرب أو مقدرة, or it will be estimation للتعذر. So it could be مقدرة for التعذر. For example, Rama, which I just explained to you, that this is alif. Alif cannot take any haraka, so you have an excuse. That's why they say تعذر. أو للثقل, for something is very hard, heaviness. For example, ضربت. تحفة الثانية, he explained this case differently. For example, ضربت. Here he's saying it's ثقل. Yes, maybe so, but تحفة الثانية, Muhammad Muhaddin, he will say that Arab does not like four haraka being continuously. So ضربت. So you have four different haraka continuously happening. So this is something what he will say that Arab does not like. You understand? So that's why they will make a sukun in between. Okay, so this is also fine. At the end of the day, it is for thiqal. The reason why Arab doesn't like for haraka continuously is for thiqal. So both explanation is fine. Okay, so aw lil munasib, or for some munasiba, for something that is appropriate, like he said darabu, because of wow always begs for dhamma. So okay, fine, we'll give you dhamma. You understand this part? وقد سار المصنف على هذا المذهب. So he said that this Musannif, Ajrumiyyah, he goes with this madhab. He prefers this madhab. كما هو ظاهر, which is apparent from him saying الماضي مفتوح مفتوح الآخر أبدا. Okay, so this is very apparent that this is the opinion that he follows. But he says ولكن الذي ذكرناه, the thing that he mentioned, meaning here, the madhab that he mentioned, في الشرح هو أيسر, this is easier على المبتدئين, for the beginners. Which is true. If you see something, see in front of your eyes, it's much easier. You can see that there's a wow, sorry, there's a dhamma, so it's very easy for you to say it's mabni ala dhamma. Much more easier than you have to say, oh, it's taqdiri, and then there's a fatha in behind the scene, all this thing. Okay, so as you can see, the grammar is very interesting. Knowing this part honestly will not change the meaning or anything. It's something that only the grammarians will appreciate, but the beginners who just wants to learn something benefit right away, how does that help with the meaning? Honestly, it doesn't. If you don't like this kind of discussions, you will not like alfia or anything. They will go way much more in discussion about why something happens. They will bring the Arabs, how they think, which is I find them fascinating. So is it clear? So it makes sense. So that's all I wanted to read from here. So the same thing would be with Amr, but we will not read the explanation of the Amr, but you can read either Tuhfat Saniya or you can read the Mumte, where he will explain that it's mabni on other situation. Okay, فهمتم? But as far as our concern right now, what we need to know is that Madi and both of them are mabni. So we're not interested in. What are we interested in is al-mudari. And then al-mudari would be mu'rab. And it has different states. And then we'll start reading from the beginning, what we skipped. Remember, for all these states, we need to know the alama. Remember these things. When the grammarian looks at anything, they look at the states first. Does it have state? If it has states, they're interested. If it doesn't have states, they're not interested. Mabni, they don't have states, they're not interested. Morab, it has states, they're interested. Then they will ask how many states they have. They find out, okay, so they have 3 states. Then they will ask, how do I know that this word belongs to that states? Then they will say, okay, raf means dhamma, then it has, for example, thubut and noon for the verbs. So they will go into this. How do we know that something is nasb? How do we know something is a jazm? Once they clear this thing up, and then guys, we'll move into why something gets in not state, why something gets just state. That's when we'll start learning about learn, and then we'll learn about here. All these things will come. Okay, فهمتم? So inshallah, next class, we will go back to the text that we missed, and then inshallah, we will continue from there.